Hey everybody, what's going on? Dace here and welcome back. Today we continue the Psikyo Appreciation micro-series, or whatever you want to call it. Last time we jumped into Gunbird, and it was great dipping into that a little bit and sharing the game in a new light compared to when I initially checked it out when I started the channel. Next up we have Strikers 1945, and it came out that same year, believe it or not. Yeah, this was released in 1995 though. In 1996, it would receive PlayStation and Sega Saturn ports by Atlus. Later on, it would make its way to PlayStation 2 as part of the Psikyo shooting collection by Taito. Then, of course, we've seen this game surface on physical releases such as the Psikyo Collection Volume 1, Psikyo Shooting Library Volume 1, and Psikyo Shooting Stars Alpha. The story takes place just after World War II. A mysterious organization appears and tries to conquer Earth with insanely powerful weapons no one could have fathomed, and a bunch of highly skilled pilots are selected to eliminate the threat. I think it's a pretty wild story, but Psikyo has a way of infusing charm and purpose into the mix. I don't typically feel drawn to the old-style military aesthetic, but the Strikers games pack such a solid punch, and the first in the series is no exception. From the moment you start the run, it's nothing but guns blazing, enemies exploding every second, super fun stages, and epic boss fights. Plus, the sound effects in this game are astounding. As I played Strikers during this video's production period, there were times I imagined myself high above the ground amidst the chaos of gunfire and explosions. That's how immersive the sound effects are. We have 2 loops in Strikers, but unlike Gunbird's stage arrangement, each loop has 8 stages and the first 4 levels are randomized. You have various planes to choose from, all of which play differently from one another thanks to a unique combination of standard shot, charge shot, and bombs. 2 of my most preferred are the Messerschmitt BF19 and P38 Lightning. What I love about the BF19 is that when you are firing normally with options, they pinpoint enemies without you needing to do anything. This is great for staying on top of enemy craft flying in from the upper sides of the screen, or in general just dealing with multiple targets simultaneously. The awesome thing though is that when you charge and release, your options cluster together and linger on the screen while slowly moving upward. This is especially potent when used against bosses or large enemies. The only downside is that once you drop your options, you have a lengthy enough wait before you get them back, but you can at least move around independently. I like the P38 because the charge shot drops your options and they stay in the same spot firing straight ahead, but for a much shorter period. Once you have a handful of options, the width of their attack gives you a decent amount of screen coverage. Like the BF109, you still get to move around independently, but the shorter duration of the P38's charge shot gives you the advantage of setting it strategically more often. Despite only mentioning 2 of the 6 planes, they are all really cool, so don't take this as the P38 and BF109 are the only good ones. I just want to keep this video shorter instead of attempting to cover every detail. Something more in-depth can be tackled later for those interested. In any event, the more you explore each aircraft, the more you start to see advantages you might not notice if you only sample each plane briefly. This is pretty standard for any game offering various playable ships or characters. Sometimes we progress with one type over another. Sometimes our progress doesn't have much of an indicator. In the episode on Gunbird, I covered how progress feels more like a background process, and then you suddenly start doing much better once you've hit a certain threshold of experience. From what I recall, Sengoku Blade felt the same way, and interestingly enough, I've never encountered this outside of Psikyo titles. That said, despite Psikyo games all following a very similar formula for the most part, I don't feel Strikers has that same kind of deceptive or elusive quality where awareness of progress is concerned. In Strikers, I'm well aware of my general progress outside of individual runs. I've noticed that my progress comes from developing a greater understanding of how best to use my charge shot or options in general. That's been my experience anyway, and that appears to be the relationship or interaction Strikers promotes. There are a lot of games that include charge shots. Look at the Visara titles. You have a charge shot that can be released to swipe away bullets. On the other hand, Strikers enhances and complicates this idea by introducing a charge shot tied to a risk-reward system. It's not a simple matter of charging up to release a big blast or to cancel bullets with a slash and then doing it again moments later when the cooldown ends. In that situation, you're not temporarily giving anything up, and more often than not, the charge time is a small price to pay since the risk of getting hit while charging is minimal. However, depending on the aircraft, releasing your charge shot is a commitment in Strikers. You're sacrificing valuable resources close to you to gain an advantage elsewhere. That advantage could be speed killing a tough machine that rolls into view, or sending out a few spinning blades that cancel bullets they come into contact with. Regardless, we're plunged into a framework where careful consideration of when and where we use our options can mean the difference between taking a hit during a stage or boss fight especially, or cruising onward without issue. Those are two incredibly different outcomes, and if we want greater longevity, it makes sense to understand that relationship. As an example, let's look at the BF19 in slow motion. On the left side, our options are beside us, and on the right, we drop them in front. Observe how rapidly doing an option drop deals with the first 3 guns of the vessel compared to how long it takes to bring things down when they remain next to us. While we do see some of the options being distracted by other things in the left side gameplay, it doesn't make much of a difference because dropping your options as seen in the gameplay on the right side has an amplified damage output, even though in both situations the aircraft is at the same power level and is accompanied by 2 options. So to bring this back to the game's nuance, the stages themselves are super short and not overly demanding. Of course, the later stages certainly ramp up the mayhem quite a bit, but I still feel the bulk of the game's difficulty is condensed into the boss encounters simply due to how constantly polluted the screen is during these fights, and that's where the greatest understanding of when and where to drop needs to come to the forefront. You can go from feeling intimidated or uncertain about how an attack pattern will pan out to feeling confident and in control. For instance, there are some bosses where I would adjust when I drop my options ever so slightly. Instead of deploying them the moment that next section of the boss becomes damageable, I first shoot with my options normally for a bit and then drop them because the thing that comes up to attack me after comes up fast and immediately applies pressure that can easily result in taking a hit. So you need to balance these things and create that delay yourself so that the option drop is still on the screen dealing with the big threat instead of moving past it too early and taking up precious seconds to finish leaving the top of the screen before you can start charging again. Because in those situations, you leave yourself wide open and it's incredibly dangerous. But the challenges you face in Strikers are not without their immense rewards. The satisfaction of breaking into stage 6 or 7 for the first time, or figuring out a particular boss that's been giving you trouble, encourages you to keep pushing no matter what. And that's part of the magic of the Psikyo titles. They can sometimes feel more ruthless than other games, but the thrill of being in the pilot seat in a Psikyo game always strikes differently. With crunchy sound effects, edge-of-your-seat gameplay, cool boss phases, and a solid selection of playable aircraft, Strikers 1945 has left an ever-smoldering imprint on the shmup landscape, and is another game I'm thankful has remained with us over the decades. But let me know what you guys think. Have you played Strikers? If so, what's your preferred aircraft and why? Are there any Psikyo titles that are next on your list to explore? Let me know in the comments. In the next installment of the series, we'll jump into Sengoku Ace, also known as Samurai Aces, a game I enjoyed clearing on normal, hard, and very hard difficulty 2 years ago. We'll talk about the game and my experience, and I'll touch on the approach you can sometimes use to blast through harder modes. It's yet another Psikyo title brimming with creativity, action, and everything in between. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you all next time. Take care.